Charles Worthington had always been a man of grand wealth but little joy. The towering skyscrapers of Manhattan bore his name, a legacy built through decades of calculated decisions, long hours, and a steadfast refusal to allow anything or anyone to stand in his way. Yet now, at 78, Charles found himself utterly alone. His wealth was boundless, but his heart was empty. He had no family left. His wife had passed years ago, and the estrangement from his only nephew, Ethan, left a void no amount of money could fill. When Charles made the decision to move into Evergreen Manor, a luxury nursing home nestled in the quiet suburbs of Connecticut, he was not seeking companionship or comfort. He was merely fulfilling the logical next step for a man in his twilight years. Evergreen Manor was renowned for its pristine facilities and white glove service. It promised care and luxury for those who could afford its astronomical fees. But for Charles, it was just another address, a place to wait out the inevitable. From the moment he entered Evergreen Manor, Charles felt a coldness he couldn't quite explain. The exterior was breathtaking. Manicured gardens with vibrant flowers, grand columns flanking the entrance, and a sparkling marble fountain that seemed to sing of opulence. Inside, the floors gleamed, chandeliers cast warm light across the spacious lobby, and staff in neatly pressed uniforms offered polite, rehearsed smiles. But beneath the polished surface, Charles sensed a hollowness. The air felt heavy, the residents moved like ghosts, and the staff's smiles vanished the moment they thought no one was watching. For all its luxury, Evergreen Manor lacked something far more vital: warmth, humanity, and sincerity. Charles spent his days in solitude, sitting in his lavish suite or wandering the grounds. The walls were lined with exquisite artwork, yet they felt as lifeless as the canned music that echoed softly through the halls. Conversations were rare. Most residents seemed either lost in their own world or unwilling to engage. The staff, while efficient, treated their duties like a routine, devoid of care or compassion. Charles often found himself wondering if anyone here actually cared, or if this was merely a well-oiled machine designed to extract wealth from the lonely and the aging. He kept to himself, his sharp blue eyes observing everything, quietly taking note of the subtle cracks in the glossy veneer of Evergreen Manor. There was a strange comfort in his isolation. After all, he had spent most of his life surrounded by people who wanted something from him. Here, he was just another old man in an expensive chair. But even in his indifference, Charles couldn't shake a growing unease. Something was off about this place. He didn't know what it was, but he felt it in the way the staff hurried past the more demanding residents, the way conversations seemed to die in hushed whispers whenever management was nearby, and the way some residents, like him, seemed to withdraw further into themselves with each passing day. It was a gilded prison, and Charles, though resigned to his fate, couldn't help but wonder how many others here felt the same way. Charles first noticed her while sitting on the veranda overlooking the garden. She was small in stature, her figure almost swallowed by the oversized uniform she wore. Yet there was something undeniably radiant about her, a glow that seemed out of place in the sterile, mechanical atmosphere of Evergreen Manor. Her hair, tied back into a simple ponytail, swayed gently as she moved, and her hands worked swiftly, tidying up chairs that had been left askew by residents. What struck him most was her smile. Despite the clear burden of her tasks, she smiled at everyone, from the grumpy old man in the corner to the staff who barely acknowledged her presence. There was no resentment or bitterness in her expression, only a quiet warmth that seemed to say, "I'm here to help." Charles soon learned her name, Anna. He overheard one of the nurses barking orders at her from across the hall. "Anna, don't forget the bathrooms on the second floor." The woman snapped, not even bothering to wait for a response. Anna simply nodded, her smile unwavering, and moved to fetch her cleaning supplies. He couldn't understand it. The other staff treated her as though she were invisible or, worse, as though her sole purpose was to handle the tasks no one else wanted. She worked tirelessly, pushing heavy laundry carts, scrubbing floors, and even assisting with difficult residents who required more care than the other nurses seemed willing to provide. Charles observed her closely, intrigued by her resilience. He soon noticed something else. Anna never responded to the sharp comments or condescending remarks from her colleagues. It wasn't that she was ignoring them. She simply couldn't hear them. Anna was deaf. This realization deepened his curiosity. How could someone so mistreated, so marginalized, still carry such light in their heart? Charles couldn't shake the feeling that there was something extraordinary about this girl. Madeline Hastings, the manager of Evergreen Manor, was a picture of polished authority. With her tailored suits, meticulously styled hair, and a permanent smirk that seemed to convey both superiority and indifference, she ruled the nursing home with an iron fist wrapped in a velvet glove. To the residents' families, she was the embodiment of professionalism, always ready with a rehearsed smile and a promise of excellent care. But behind closed doors, Madeline revealed her true colors. She was ruthless, driven by greed and a thirst for power. Evergreen Manor to her was less about providing care and more about extracting every possible dollar from its wealthy clientele. Budgets were trimmed to the bone, staff was overworked, and any complaints were swiftly silenced. Anna, with her quiet demeanor and inability to protest, became Madeline's favorite target. To Madeline, Anna was nothing more than cheap labor, a girl who wouldn't complain, couldn't talk back, and worked tirelessly without question. She assigned Anna the most grueling tasks, from scrubbing the bathrooms to bathing the more challenging residents. "Anna, you're slow. Get moving." Madeline would bark, her voice sharp and cutting as she strolled past with her clipboard. For Madeline, Anna's kindness and resilience weren't virtues, they were weaknesses to exploit. Anna's days at Evergreen Manor were a relentless cycle of labor and exhaustion. From the moment she arrived each morning, she was met with piles of work no one else wanted to touch. She cleaned rooms, scrubbed floors, hauled heavy laundry baskets, and even stayed late into the night to cover shifts others refused to take. While the other staff clocked out promptly, Anna often found herself working long into the night, her only companions the soft hum of fluorescent lights and the faint rustle of the residents' movements as they slept. The injustice was plain to see, yet no one seemed to care. Her colleagues saw her as an easy target, someone who wouldn't push back, wouldn't argue, and couldn't even hear the snide comments they made behind her back. "She's too slow," one nurse muttered one afternoon as Anna struggled to maneuver a cart piled high with soiled linens. Another laughed, "But at least she doesn't complain. She can't." Anna was often left to deal with the most difficult tasks. Residents who were prone to outbursts or had complicated medical needs were frequently assigned to her care. She was expected to clean up spills, calm tempers, and handle every mishap with the same quiet efficiency. And she did, without a single complaint, without a single word of resistance. One evening, as Anna was cleaning the dining hall after dinner, a resident's bracelet went missing. Whispers quickly spread among the staff, and before Anna could understand what was happening, she was accused of stealing it. Madeline was swift in her judgment. "Anna, I don't care how tired you are," Madeline said with a cold sneer. "If you can't keep your hands to yourself, maybe you shouldn't be here at all." Anna tried to explain, using gestures and a pleading expression, but her words, or lack of them, fell on deaf ears. No one believed her. For days, the incident hung over her like a dark cloud, isolating her further from her coworkers. Yet even in the face of such injustice, Anna's kindness never faltered. She continued to care for the residents with the same gentle touch and heartfelt smile. She braided Mrs. Kensington's hair each morning, knowing it reminded her of her younger days. She carefully arranged fresh flowers on Mr. Barnett's bedside table, bringing a bit of color to his otherwise dull room. Her presence became a source of comfort for many of the residents, even if they couldn't fully understand the burden she carried. Anna's light, though small and fragile, shone brightly in the darkness of Evergreen Manor. For the residents, she was a rare reminder that genuine care and love still existed, even in a place as cold and hollow as this. Charles had always been a keen observer, and Anna's quiet strength fascinated him. He watched her move about the nursing home, her small frame carrying the weight of tasks far beyond what seemed fair. Yet, despite the long hours, the unkind words from her colleagues, and the constant demands, she never lost that radiant smile. One afternoon, as Charles sat by the window in the common room, he saw Anna carefully placing a blanket over a resident who had fallen asleep in her chair. The gesture was simple, but there was a tenderness in the way Anna worked that stirred something deep within him, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. For days, he debated how to approach her. Charles was a man of words and power, but here, facing a young woman who couldn't hear him, he felt at a loss. Finally, he decided to write her a note. On a small piece of paper, he scrawled, "You work harder than anyone here. How do you keep smiling?" The next day, he handed her the note. Anna paused, her eyes scanning the words before meeting his. Her face lit up with a smile, and she gestured for a pen. Beneath his note, she wrote simply, "Because some people need it." From that moment, an unspoken bond formed between them. Charles began to leave her notes daily, asking small questions about her life, her thoughts, her dreams. In return, Anna shared bits of her world through her handwriting, gestures, and expressions. For Charles, Anna's resilience and joy in the face of adversity became a source of hope. She reminded him that even in a world filled with greed and indifference, there were still people who chose to be kind. Through Anna, Charles began to see the possibility of change, not just in the nursing home, but within himself. Charles's sharp instincts, honed over decades in business, began to pick up on the subtle cracks beneath Evergreen Manor's polished surface. The impeccable image Madeline projected to visiting families was just that, an image. Behind the scenes, the reality was far grimmer. He noticed how the residents' needs were often ignored or hastily attended to by staff who seemed more interested in their breaks than their duties. Meals were served lukewarm, medications occasionally delayed, and cleanliness in the less visible corners of the facility left much to be desired. While the nursing home boasted a luxurious exterior, the care provided inside felt haphazard at best. The financial discrepancies troubled him most. Despite the exorbitant fees charged to residents, Charles noticed signs of cost-cutting everywhere: cheaper supplies, overburdened staff, and equipment that was clearly outdated. Conversations he overheard between staff hinted at missing budgets and unexplained reassignments of funds, all of which pointed directly to Madeline's office. Anna, however, stood in stark contrast to the rest of the staff. While others completed their tasks with indifference, Anna poured her heart into everything she did. She carefully tucked blankets around frail bodies, arranged flowers in bedside vases, and took extra time to ensure residents were comfortable. Charles couldn't help but wonder, why was someone like Anna treated so poorly while others skated by with the bare minimum? His suspicions about Madeline grew. Her dismissive tone, the way she avoided direct questions from residents' families, and her tendency to bark orders rather than lead all hinted at deeper corruption. Charles began to piece together the truth. Evergreen Manor wasn't just poorly run, it was being systematically exploited by the very person meant to protect its residents. Watching Anna work tirelessly amidst this chaos strengthened his resolve. If she could give her all in such an unjust environment, Charles knew he couldn't simply sit by and do nothing. Anna's workload, already overwhelming, seemed to grow heavier with each passing day. Madeline, fueled by her disdain for Anna and the convenience of her silence, began assigning her tasks that were beyond unreasonable. She made Anna scrub the dining hall floors twice in a single day, handle large shipments of supplies by herself, and even stay late to clean the bathrooms when others had already gone home. Anna never complained, though her exhaustion was evident in the slow shuffle of her feet and the droop of her shoulders. One particularly grueling afternoon, as Anna struggled to wheel a heavy cart of laundry down the hallway, Madeline's shrill voice cut through the air. "Anna, why isn't the second floor lounge cleaned yet? Get it done now!" she barked, her tone cold and demanding. Anna, with her usual quiet obedience, nodded and turned the cart toward the stairs. Charles, sitting nearby, watched the exchange with growing anger. That evening, chaos erupted when a resident, Mrs. Kensington, reported that her gold bracelet was missing. The bracelet, a treasured family heirloom, had been left on her bedside table but was now nowhere to be found. Madeline wasted no time pointing fingers. Anna was the last one in that room, she declared with a tone of finality. It's obvious who's responsible. Anna's eyes widened in shock as she shook her head vehemently, trying to explain through gestures that she hadn't taken anything. But Madeline ignored her attempts, waving dismissively as if Anna's protests were beneath her. "I've had enough of this," Madeline continued. "Anna, if you can't be trusted, maybe you don't belong here anymore." Charles, seated nearby, could see the humiliation and helplessness on Anna's face. She looked around, desperate for someone to believe her, but no one stepped forward. Her coworkers avoided her gaze, unwilling to stand up to Madeline, while the other residents looked on in uncomfortable silence. It was at that moment that Charles decided he could no longer remain a passive observer. He had spent weeks watching the injustices unfold, but this was the breaking point. He saw not just the cruelty of the accusation, but the systematic way Madeline exploited Anna's vulnerability, using her silence as a weapon against her. Later that night, as Anna sat alone in the corner of the dining hall, wiping down tables with trembling hands, Charles approached her. He slid a note across the table. "I believe you, and I'm going to help." Anna read the words, her teary eyes meeting his with a glimmer of hope. Charles gave her a firm nod, silently vowing to uncover the truth and bring justice, not just for Anna, but for everyone suffering under Madeline's oppressive rule. The time for watching was over. It was time to act. Charles knew that taking down someone like Madeline required more than anger and determination. It required proof. The following morning, he began his quiet mission, carefully observing and documenting the daily operations of Evergreen Manor. Armed with a small notebook and a sharp mind, Charles noted every instance of Madeline's mistreatment toward staff, especially Anna, and the countless ways she exploited the residents. He started by positioning himself in the common areas, where he could watch Madeline interact with staff and residents. Her cruelty was on full display. He saw her berate a nurse for wasting supplies, while clearly pocketing money meant for those very essentials. He overheard her speaking harshly to Anna, piling on tasks with no regard for her physical limits. Every detail went into his notebook, the dates, times, and even direct quotes when he could catch them. What troubled Charles more was the financial aspect. The nursing home's fees were astronomical, yet the state of the facilities and resources didn't align with the money pouring in. He noticed the same linens being used well past their prime, and food portions that seemed far too meager for the budget being allocated. It didn't add up. Realizing he needed help, Charles reached out to his estranged nephew, Ethan, a successful attorney specializing in corporate fraud. Though their relationship had been distant for years, Charles knew Ethan's sharp instincts and legal expertise were exactly what he needed. He sent him a detailed letter explaining the situation, along with the notes he'd compiled. Ethan responded quickly. After a brief phone call where Charles outlined his suspicions, Ethan agreed to investigate Evergreen Manor's financial records. Within days, Ethan discovered alarming discrepancies. Bank statements revealed unexplained withdrawals, and invoices showed inflated prices for supplies that never seemed to arrive. Madeline had been skimming money for years, using a complex web of fake accounts and falsified reports to cover her tracks. Meanwhile, Charles procured a small camera and began discreetly recording Madeline's interactions with staff. He captured her berating Anna for minor mistakes, ignoring residents' complaints, and even pocketing cash from a petty cash drawer under the pretense of buying supplies. Piece by piece, Charles and Ethan built a case. Madeline's empire of deceit was beginning to crumble, and Charles felt a sense of purpose he hadn't experienced in years. Justice, he knew, was within reach. In the days following the accusation, Anna withdrew even further into herself. Though she continued her work with the same quiet dedication, there was a heaviness to her movements now, as if the weight of the world pressed harder on her small shoulders. Her usual radiant smile had faded, replaced by a pensive expression that tugged at Charles's heart. He decided it was time to do more than just watch and plan. One evening, as Anna sat in the corner of the dining hall folding napkins, Charles approached her with his familiar notepad in hand. He slid a note across the table. "You are not alone. I see everything they're doing to you, and I'm not going to let it continue." Anna read the words carefully, her hands trembling slightly as she processed the message. When she looked up at Charles, her eyes glistened with unshed tears. She gestured, pointing to herself and shaking her head as if to say, "Why me?" Charles scribbled quickly in response, "Because you don't deserve this. You work harder than anyone here, and they take advantage of you because they think you can't fight back. But I can." Anna's lips quivered, and for the first time in days, she smiled. A small, hesitant smile, but a smile nonetheless. She reached for the pen and wrote beneath his words, "Thank you." From that moment, their bond grew deeper. Charles made a point of leaving her encouraging notes every day. Some were simple reminders. You're stronger than they think, while others were more personal, sharing pieces of his own struggles with loneliness and purpose. Anna began to open up in her own way, sharing small glimpses of her life through gestures and written words. She told him about her love for flowers, how she used to dream of becoming a nurse, and how much she missed her younger brother, who lived far away. Their conversations, though unconventional, became a lifeline for both of them. For Charles, Anna's resilience in the face of so much adversity rekindled a sense of hope he hadn't felt in years. For Anna, knowing someone truly believed in her gave her the strength to keep going. In a world that had so often ignored her, Anna finally felt seen. And for Charles, a man who had spent his life surrounded by wealth but starved of connection, Anna was a reminder that even the smallest acts of kindness could change everything. The grand dining hall of Evergreen Manor was abuzz with anticipation. Residents sat in neatly arranged chairs, their faces alight with curiosity. Staff members stood along the walls, whispering among themselves about the unexpected announcement. Rumors had spread like wildfire. Charles Worthington, the enigmatic millionaire, was going to make a significant contribution to the nursing home. Madeline, standing near the front, wore a smug smile, basking in the assumption that her leadership was about to be richly rewarded. Charles entered the room with a calm but deliberate stride, his sharp, blue eyes scanning the crowd. He had dressed impeccably for the occasion, a subtle nod to the gravity of what was about to unfold. Holding a small remote in one hand and a folder of documents in the other, he made his way to the podium. "Thank you all for being here," Charles began, his voice steady but firm. "I've spent months as a resident of Evergreen Manor. In that time, I've observed many things, both the good and the not so good." Madeline's smile faltered slightly, but she quickly recovered, nodding as though she expected nothing but praise. Charles continued, his tone sharpening. "I came here expecting care, respect, and dignity, not just for myself, but for everyone who resides here. What I found instead was something deeply troubling." He clicked the remote, and a video began to play on the large screen behind him. The room fell silent as footage filled the screen. Madeline berating Anna for minor mistakes, pocketing cash from the petty cash drawer, and ignoring complaints from residents. Each clip painted a damning picture of a manager more interested in her own gain than the well-being of those under her care. Gasps rippled through the audience as more footage rolled. Staff members looked at each other nervously, and Madeline's face turned a deep shade of red. She took a step forward, raising her voice in protest. "This is ridiculous. These videos are out of context," she spat, her polished demeanor crumbling. Charles ignored her outburst, his voice rising over hers. "But it doesn't end there. With the help of my nephew, Ethan, I've also uncovered evidence of financial fraud, thousands of dollars funneled into private accounts under Madeline's name." He held up the folder, opening it to reveal detailed financial statements and banking records. Madeline's protests grew frantic. "This is a lie. You have no proof." "Proof is exactly what I have," Charles interrupted, his voice cutting through her words like a blade. He gestured toward the back of the room, where 2 police officers entered. "And I've already shared it with the authorities." The room erupted into murmurs as the officers approached Madeline. She stepped back, shaking her head in disbelief. "You can't do this. I've given everything to this place." One of the officers stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "Madeline Hastings, you are under arrest for fraud and abuse. You have the right to remain silent." As the officers escorted Madeline out of the room, her protests grew quieter, eventually fading into the hallway. The room remained in stunned silence for several moments before Charles spoke again. "This place, despite its flaws, has potential," he said, addressing the residents and staff. "But it needs leadership that truly cares. That's why I've decided to work with a nonprofit organization to take over Evergreen Manor. They'll ensure that every dollar is spent on improving the lives of those who live and work here." The residents erupted in applause, many rising from their chairs to shake Charles's hand or offer words of gratitude. Anna, standing quietly at the back of the room, watched the scene unfold with tears in her eyes. For the first time, she felt a glimmer of hope, not just for herself, but for everyone who had endured the hardships of this place. As Charles stepped away from the podium, he met Anna's gaze and gave her a small, reassuring nod. It wasn't just justice that had been served. It was the beginning of something better. After the chaos of the meeting settled, Charles sought Anna out. She was standing near the entrance to the garden, her hands clasped tightly together as she stared at the ground. The weight of the accusation, the relentless work, and the constant humiliation seemed etched into her posture. Charles approached her with the same quiet determination he had shown that day at the dining table when he promised to help. This time, though, he carried something more tangible. He handed her a note, written in his familiar, precise handwriting. "You've been treated unfairly, but now the truth is out. You're free from their cruelty." Anna read the words carefully, her lips trembling as her eyes filled with tears. She shook her head slowly, as if struggling to believe it was over. Charles gently touched her arm to reassure her, then handed her another note. "I want to help you build the future you deserve. You told me you dreamed of being a nurse. Let me make that dream come true." Anna's eyes widened in shock, and she covered her mouth with her hands. Her mind raced, trying to process what he was offering. She had spent so long being told she was worthless, used only for the hardest tasks, that the idea of someone believing in her potential felt almost surreal. With trembling hands, she took the pen and wrote back, "Why me?" Charles smiled, his eyes warm and kind. He wrote beneath her question, "Because you deserve it. Your kindness, your strength, it's time the world gave back to you." For the first time in what felt like forever, Anna allowed herself to hope. Charles's offer wasn't just a way out of Evergreen Manor. It was the start of a new chapter in her life, one where her kindness and dedication could flourish. As the days passed, Anna's life began to transform. With Charles's support and the toxic presence of Madeline finally gone, a new sense of peace settled over Evergreen Manor. Yet amidst the changes, there was one constant that surprised her: Ethan. Ethan had been a quiet but steady presence since he arrived to help his uncle. While most of their communication had been indirect, Anna noticed the way he would watch her work with admiration, his gaze soft and sincere. He always made an effort to greet her with a friendly smile or hold open a door as she passed. One afternoon, as Anna sat in the courtyard enjoying a rare moment of rest, Ethan approached her, holding a notebook and pen. He hesitated for a moment before sitting beside her, his confident demeanor slightly softened by nervousness. He handed her a note. "I've watched the way you care for others. You inspire me, Anna." Anna blushed deeply, glancing at him with a mix of surprise and shyness. She quickly wrote back, "I'm just doing my job." Ethan shook his head, smiling as he took the pen again. "It's more than that. You make people feel seen, cared for. You made my uncle believe in something again." Over the weeks that followed, Ethan began learning sign language, starting with basic phrases. At first, his gestures were clumsy, but Anna's laughter, light and genuine, encouraged him to keep trying. Slowly, their exchanges grew more fluid, each sign a bridge between their worlds. One evening, after practicing together, Ethan signed for the first time, "I like you, Anna." Tears welled in her eyes as she signed back, "Why me?" Ethan smiled warmly, signing with newfound confidence, "Because you're extraordinary." In that moment, Anna's self-doubt melted away. For the first time, she saw herself through Ethan's eyes, not as a girl limited by her silence, but as someone worthy of love. Evergreen Manor was no longer the cold, hollow place it had once been. Under the management of the nonprofit organization Charles had partnered with, sweeping changes transformed the nursing home into a beacon of care and dignity. The once overworked staff now operated in a fairer, more supportive environment, with proper training and resources to meet the residents' needs. The air, once heavy with tension and discontent, now felt lighter, filled with the soft murmur of laughter and conversations. The residents, who had long suffered under Madeline's neglect, began to thrive. Meals were served hot and on time, activities were organized to keep their minds engaged, and their voices were finally heard. The staff, too, found new motivation. With fair pay and manageable workloads, they approached their duties with renewed energy and compassion. Amid these changes, Anna returned, not as the exploited cleaner she had once been, but as a licensed nurse. Charles's support had allowed her to enroll in a nursing program, and after months of hard work, she earned her certification with top marks. When she stepped back into Evergreen Manor, she was greeted not with condescension, but with admiration and respect. The residents, who had always appreciated Anna's kindness, were overjoyed to see her in her new role. "You've always had a nurse's heart," Mrs. Kensington told her one afternoon, her voice warm with affection. "Now you have the badge to prove it." Anna worked with the same dedication she always had, but now her efforts were valued. She cared for the residents with her signature attentiveness, ensuring they felt seen and loved. She was no longer a background figure, but a vital part of the home's heartbeat. For the first time, Evergreen Manor felt like a true home, a place where every individual, whether staff or resident, mattered. And Anna, once overlooked and underestimated, was at the center of it all, shining brighter than ever. Anna's journey from the shadows of exploitation to the forefront of compassion was nothing short of extraordinary. After years of silent suffering, she now stood tall as a symbol of resilience and hope. Her life, once confined by the walls of Evergreen Manor, had expanded into something far greater. Ethan had been by her side every step of the way. Their bond, forged through mutual respect and understanding, blossomed into a love that felt natural and unshakable. On a crisp spring morning, surrounded by the residents and staff who had become like family, Anna and Ethan exchanged vows in a simple but heartfelt ceremony. Charles, standing proudly beside them, gave a speech that left no eye dry. "She taught me," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his chest, "that kindness is the greatest wealth anyone can possess. And today, I see her share that wealth with everyone she meets." Together, Anna, Ethan, and Charles began building something even greater than the new Evergreen Manor. With Charles's guidance and funding, they established a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting vulnerable communities. The charity focused on improving conditions in nursing homes, advocating for fair treatment of workers, and providing scholarships for aspiring healthcare professionals, people like Anna, who just needed a chance. Though his health began to decline, Charles lived long enough to see the seeds of their work bear fruit. He watched as their organization grew, helping countless people and setting new standards for care across the region. On his final days, he found peace in the knowledge that his actions had made a difference. Sitting with Anna and Ethan, he smiled, his voice soft but steady. "You've made this world a little brighter," he told them. "Keep going." After Charles's passing, Anna and Ethan carried forward his legacy. Anna's story, from a girl who was overlooked and mistreated to a celebrated advocate for change, inspired everyone who heard it. She became a voice for those who couldn't speak for themselves, her life a testament to the power of kindness and perseverance. In the years that followed, Anna often reflected on how far she had come. She had once been just a girl, scrubbing floors in a place that saw her as invisible. Now, she was a leader, a healer, and a symbol of hope for so many. And through it all, she never forgot the quiet man with a sharp mind and a kind heart who had believed in her when no one else did. This story is a tribute to the quiet strength of kindness and the courage to fight for justice. It reminds us that even the smallest gestures, a smile, a helping hand, can ripple outwards and change lives. Through Anna's resilience and Charles's determination, we see the power of standing up against injustice, not just for ourselves, but for those who cannot fight alone. Most importantly, it is a story of hope, showing that even in the darkest times, love and optimism can prevail. May it inspire you to believe in the goodness of humanity and the transformative power of compassion. If this story touched your heart, don't miss out on more inspiring tales. Subscribe now and join us in spreading hope, kindness, and the fight for justice. Together, we can make a difference, one story at a time.